joining us this afternoon. So when we were putting together this study and engaging very closely over the last few months with Space to Grow as well as the WeEducate Foundation, it just struck us how broad and how deep the problem is. So we came to understand that out of the 16 million people that are today and which is also a fairly big guesstimate involved in sex work, over 80% of them have been trafficked and have landed there due to various different compulsions. And once there, it has been a fairly sensitive navigating around the ecosystem to even be able to bring back income, bring back a more sustainable form of livelihood to support them and often their children, because many of them have children too. And COVID has actually added quite a few dimensions that are troubling to this entire piece. Our need assessment throws up that financial difficulties have been even more exacerbated because of COVID. Nearly all of them have had no incomes for over a quarter, and many of them have been forced to take loans, particularly from in the informal sources of economy, because they're just not connected to any other kind of debt availability and debt providers. Again, with fairly with fairly unfair interest models and repayment models, which further have compounded their condition. So and added to that is the idea that this is probably a source of livelihood that one cannot escape from, because one neither has the information that allows one to examine other choices, nor the skills and agency to be able to even conceive of a future that might help to move into an alternative source of livelihood. So so when we delved deeper into this problem, the entire 360-degree nature of this struck us quite a bit. We said, where do you start solving for it? I mean, you start at the social norms and the and the behavioral change that needs to come in, and a lot of these systems that are invisible to these commercial sex workers that probably needs to be in place. Can we even look at mainstreaming a model of livelihood which is not niche, serves a few tens and is unable to scale, but move to a point where we are able to imagine this as being viable and a feasible form of livelihood for many of them that want to come out of it to then earn dignified sources of livelihood and income, and for the well-being of them and their families. So that is what brought us here, and we have a very eminent set of practitioners, funders, and members of the ecosystem that have been very closely involved in the space, and we really look forward to hearing more from them. With that, I would love to invite Nagma, our keynote speaker for the day, and over to you, Alisha, to introduce Nagma and have so we could listen to her keynote. Thank you.
Thank you, Aarti. But I think right now, before that, we've got a guest who's joined us from quite far. And our next speaker is Ms. Madhavi Pratt, who's the founder at WeEducate Foundation. She has a passion for spreading literacy and access to education around the world. And with her background of 30+ years as a teacher and educator, as well as multiple business owners, she founded WeEducate Foundation, which brings education in new, innovative ways to those who need it most. So along with her team, she has developed an innovative technology-enabled blended learning lab program to teach conversational English speaking skills to underprivileged and underserved kids in India. And Ms. Pratt, since you've been joining us from so far, we thank you for staying up so late. We'd love to hear from you a few remarks, introductory remarks.
Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be here with such wonderful, esteemed people. And it's a very good afternoon to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for this extremely pertinent discussion on building alternative livelihoods for commercial sex workers. I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce our organization, WeEducate Foundation. We work in different parts of the world on inclusive skilling and livelihoods. We build innovative models that are adopted by skilling providers to uplift marginalized groups like orphans, widows, women affected by war, and commercial sex workers. These were mentioned earlier too. These models are cutting edge solutions that can be implemented by on ground partners. Sex workers are at the center of the mission of many organizations. Anyone working with women, girls, justice, vulnerable communities, trafficking, or financial inclusion will find sex workers are at the core of these groups. So, from lack of access to education to physical abuse, debt bondage, sex trafficking, gender bias, financial exclusion, and currently a pandemic, sex workers are a segment of girls, women, and marginalized communities that reflect the heart of whom we should serve. They have faced tremendous hardships. During this pandemic, they are at a turning point. And as Dr. Beulah will scientifically show us, lakhs of Indian sex workers during this pandemic are falling into an inescapable lifelong debt trap. This is, in fact, the largest movement of people into slavery in his human history in such a short time frame. But this major human rights crisis can be averted. And you will see from the needs assessment that's been conducted by Satwa what is required. The skilling challenges sex workers face require innovation to solve. The alternative livelihoods strategy that is being built represents true sectoral innovation. This kind of innovation requires an ecosystem of leaders to guide it, and we are very, very grateful, deeply grateful for all of you for joining us today. We are excited to come together and create something transformative with you now and over the upcoming future of this program. Now, I'm really excited to share that WeEducate has partnered with Chitra Iyer of Space to Grow. Chitra is a recognized expert in building livelihood models for marginalized women. Chitra and Satwa have put together an innovative strategy for sustainable livelihoods for sex workers that we aim to scale through partners as well as the government. Today's roundtable will engage with you on this work. We'll share our insights and begin collaborations that we hope will shape this domain and many, many lives. Thank you all so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Madhavi Pratt. We really appreciate your thoughts and your views on this. And I now invite our esteemed speaker, Ms. Nagma Mullah, to address our guests. Ms. Mullah is the President and Chief Operating Officer at WeEducate Foundation. She also serves as a director on the board of the foundation. She has been a director at Railway Children India. She is a chartered accountant from the Institute of Chartered Accountants of India and holds a master's degree, MCOM from Pune University. Over to you, Ms. Mullah.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining this conversation. And thank you, Satwa, for inviting me. This conversation is much more important and much I truly appreciate that there are so many of us who are concerned. I was requested to to begin this event with a little bit of what I think about livelihoods for commercial sex workers, but I want to actually take about 2 minutes to go back many years ago, and because I feel this issue whenever we speak about commercial sex workers or maybe beneficiaries in the ecosystem of philanthropy, we are so caught up in the structure of what we need to do that a little bit of attention to the human beings that are bound by that structure is sometimes missing. I know that Satwa has done a need assessment, so they've definitely covered it. But I would like to also dedicate about a minute or two of my keynote speech to the human aspect of what I as a child have seen. See, Kamatipura was a very integral part of my growing up, because between our home and my dad's office, whenever we drove or we walked, there was Kamatipura right in the middle. And at that tender age, when I didn't understand what commercial sex work was or what prostitution was, it would, that one lane would always intrigue me, because women there seemed different. They seemed, their eyes were more listless. They were standing there doing, sometimes I thought nothing, and sometimes I was just very, very, very captivated by the expressions that I saw on the range of women standing there almost on a weekly basis, because a weekly trip to my dad's office was very important, and it was part of our growing up. And many years later, when I, with all the experience of life, when I look back and remember those faces, what I remember is not, of course, individual features, but what I remember is an expression of I felt shut down, an expression that is completely coming from a place of defense, a place of self-preservation, because and all of us here, I'm sure, appreciate that it's hard enough being in the business or in the vocation that they've been either forced or chosen to be there. But the social ostracization and the situations under which they work are so incredibly tough that I'm sure they must be having to create so much of reserve energy around it. Growing up, joining WeEducate Foundation and really coming across the work that we do under our women empowerment piece, where at least two of the names I will definitely give here. One was the work that we got involved with through Jan Sahas, and the other was the work that we got involved with Sanjog. And we were able to see how this entire, the entire piece of sex work was it was so efficiently run by a system of demand supply, by a structure where it was captivating those who worked there in such a way that exit was a monumental task. Having understood at least a little bit of what it implies, our take as an institution and mine as an individual now is much more humble, but much more determined that we cannot ignore this segment of population within the marginalized, one of the more marginalized, very, very badly treated group. And so my certain observations that I have, and certain hopes that I have, that in work that Sattva and W have kind of put together, I'm sure they will be factoring in, but some key things that I would like to place on the table is that, like any other real long-term meaningful solution, there can be nothing about them without them. So I'm very heartened by the need assessment. I hope that as the work builds, and as we keep building layer on layer and exploring what can be done to really resolve or assist in whichever way possible, I hope we never forget that the solution needs to have the stakeholder at the center. I refuse to call them beneficiaries, because really they are working an incredibly hard trade to survive. And the sad or the terrible thing about that vocation is that dignity is challenged at every. There's no dignity in that labor. Whenever we give a vocation, or we accommodate for someone's labor, dignity cannot be detached from it. This is that kind of labor where dignity has been. And sustainable profession, if you're wanting to give them a sustainable profession, dignity of work will have to be at the core of it. The whole question of caste hierarchies and gender hierarchies have to be factored as and the contribution they have to the segmentation and the devaluation of their labor will need to be done. I don't mean to prescribe it just to Sattva or to W. I feel that as members of the development sector, it is our responsibility to keep that at the center of whatever we are planning. And with the briefing that I had from Sattva and what I've read about the work that's going to be discussed today, I'm very heartened that these things are going to be factored so well. What also is something that we are also concerned about, that most of the women who enter this trade are below 18 years old. They enter it without full agency, full information, full knowledge of what they are being pulled into, either by coercion or by choice. And simply by virtue of their lack of information, this becomes coercion in my eyes. How do we systematically at that age, at that tender age, where vulnerabilities exist at such a high level, how do we even plan for something that is going to be enlightening them at the time before choices are made, or before life-changing situations happen in their lives? It is not a mean task. It is not a simple task. It needs people at all levels. It needs planners. It needs funders. It needs incredible people like Sanjog and Jan Sahas on the ground. It basically needs all of us to sit together and problem solve for this at the very core of where the problem exists. Um, COVID-19 has come at a time where vulnerabilities already existed, and the existing vulnerabilities in itself were not small. Incredibly, challenging times, and COVID-19 has made it so tough for this segment. Uh, just like daily wage earners could not provide for their families on a daily level, rations were difficult to procure. We have not even in mainstream conversations spoken of this vulnerable group. The way they've been invisibilized even in our conversations of what to do for those who cannot make ends meet on a daily level because of their vocation. We've not even addressed this concern. So it's extremely heartening for me to be seeing that a conversation of this kind and effort of this kind is being put together, because I've hardly heard anyone even speak about this in the past so many months. As we come together and talk about a concentrated effort where we are considering everything from their existing vulnerabilities to possible vocations for them, to for livelihoods, for sustainable livelihoods, I hope at the center of it, dignity of their life, choice that they need to make for themselves, information and agency are always at the core of the core and at the center of the table when all these discussions are being had today and going forward. And I have complete faith on the people who have put us all in this room together, because the thought and the intent comes from a brilliant place. I wish everyone the very best of luck, not only for today, but for the many months ahead where this difficult but very, very important task is going to be taken up. And with that, thank you very much. And I'm looking forward to the next few sessions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Nagma. That was very, very enlightening for us to hear some of that. And without any further wait, I would like Nishkarsh Swankar to share insights from the need assessment survey that was conducted by Sattva Consulting across the 4 red light areas. So Nishkarsh is an engagement manager with Sattva and a core member of the nonprofit advisory practice. He has led multiple engagements on systematic change in Indian public education, focusing on breadth of skills and early childhood development, as well as engagements in public health tech. Over to you, Nishkarsh.
Thank you, Alicia. Welcome to everyone. Thank you, and thanks a lot for joining us today. And thank you, Nagma, for great words and kind of how the ecosystem needs to come together for this this key problem. So I would just like to spend a few minutes just taking everyone through the insights of the need assessment study that Sattva had conducted with the help of a number of on-ground partners across 3 cities in India, and just highlight the nature and of the problem and the underlying aspects from a more holistic perspective of what the sex workers in the red light districts of different cities have been experiencing. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So before we begin with the insights from the need assessment, just wanted to lay the ground for on the background of the need assessment that we have conducted across the 3 cities of Delhi, Mumbai, and Kolkata, specifically focusing on the red light areas and the sex workers who live within the red light areas of these 3 cities. There were four key objectives of conducting this study. One, as Aarti and Nagma have already pointed out, is just to measure how their lives of the sex workers in these red light districts have been disrupted. It is no surprise that pretty much all marginalized communities have been affected by COVID-19, and sex workers, just owing to the nature of the job, have been disrupted massively. So this was one of the key objectives to conduct this study. The other was also to just understand their context holistically, right? In terms of whether it be their health, whether it be their support systems or education, their skilling levels, and just understanding their context in terms of in which they operate, just to see what could be the challenges for them in order to engage with any particular program that we basically come up with. Right? It's just was another objective here. The other was also to just understand their past experience, awareness, willingness to really take up alternate livelihood. It is something that alternate livelihood as an option for commercial sex workers is something that has become very important, urgent need to address as part of since COVID-19 has hit, but it is not like a completely new discussion, right? It has been around, and we just also, one of the objectives of the need assessment is also to understand how much and what has been their experience so far in terms of engaging with alternate livelihoods. And the other, of course, was to make sure we understand the more softer aspect of their context in terms of what is their agency towards taking up any of such alternate livelihood options if they are presented to them. Are they free to make their own choices? What are the factors that we need to consider in order to really see them through and see them kind of on board and be successful with any such program that we come up with. Sorry, if you can go back to the previous slide. Yeah. Very quickly, I think the context, the target group was a total of 75 respondents across red light districts in Kolkata, that's Sonagachi and Chitla, in Mumbai at Grant Road and Kamatipura, and in Delhi at GB Road. And we had looked at the target group from across three different age groups, from 18 to 25, 25 to 35, and 35 plus. The methodology and approach is really conducting in-depth, qualitative, in-person interviews with these sex workers, which typically range from 45 minutes to over an hour. There's also a significant amount of time spent on comprehensive training on the research instruments and operational processes, working with the four organizations that we've worked with across these three cities to conduct these interviews. And given, and just to kind of speak very quickly of the fact that this was a relatively contained sample size, we also have made sure that we have corroborated the insights and validated them through our discussions with experts and practitioners in the area. Right. With this, we'll just go on to the insights. So one of the most foremost challenges, right, that has come out as part of the need assessment is really aggravation of financial difficulties that that sex workers are facing. 100%. So all of the sex workers that we have spoken to have reported that they've experienced a loss of income since COVID-19 hit. In terms of, since all of them have actually experienced a loss of livelihood, the extent of livelihood that they've lost has varied from a third of their income to 100% of their income. Also, a high majority of 88% of the sex workers that we interviewed have reported they have no alternate source of income. It's only a small 12% of the sex workers who reported that they are involved in some sort of skilling program with their local NGOs, which is very basic in nature, but a very high majority do not have any alternate sources of income. Which leads us to the fact that one of the key findings is also that 62% of commercial sex workers are really borrowing to meet their financial needs. And they're borrowing from informal sources, which include either their brothel owners or their landlords, acquaintances, some of which are some of their customers. And really local money lenders. So there is a very informal borrowing that is prominent among the sex workers because of the distress that they are put in due to the pandemic. In terms of alternate livelihoods, since the majority of them do not have any alternate livelihood at the moment, 61% have actually never heard of alternate livelihood opportunities. This is a very significant finding that although these attempts have been made time and again, the majority of our sex workers we interviewed do not have not heard of any such opportunity, although 57% of them have actually considered that they would like to take up the opportunity at some point in their lives. If you can go, yeah, and I think one of the other things to also keep in mind is just the perception of what are the limiting factors in terms of it taking up an alternate livelihood. And the key factors that come out here are just the low pay compared to sex work, that alternate livelihood options that may be available to them, or that they may think they are capable of. Also, lack of viable skills and education, and also a limited awareness, as we already covered. So those are the factors that we see that have come up in our surveys where where the sex workers think that the alternate livelihoods are opportunities to them will be limiting. They also mention things like inability or to find opportunities to their liking. They have a perception of the kind of jobs they can do given their skill set, and the opportunities not always match to those aspirations. Is also what is also reported is an absence of a place to stay outside the red light area to be able to take such an opportunity. A lot of sex workers actually also feel a sense of shame if they take up an opportunity or a job out while they are living in brothels. So that's something that has also come out, and I think just the nature of the life within a brothel also restricts them from a softer perspective to be able to take up something more sustainably outside the current setting. And they also have similarly noted a need for childcare support and just unwillingness to leave their children in the brothel while they're taking up an alternate livelihood opportunity. So those are the factors that have come up as the key challenges for them to see themselves taking up anything alternative. Now, moving on to the challenges we see to engage. So we, as I said, the need assessments covered a wide range of context of the sex workers in which they work in, and there were a number of challenges to their engagement that you could foresee in any alternate livelihood opportunities that are presented to them. And the most important challenge really is that a very high majority, 60% of sex workers that we interviewed have never actually been to school. So they have no formal education. Only 13% have actually obtained education beyond secondary level. So that's a major impediment that we see in terms of them engaging. 36% of commercial sex workers that we interviewed have some form of vocational education. So they have or skilling, softer skilling in terms of like embroidery, stitching, tailoring, some of these more basic skilling programs that they've been part of. And as you already covered, 61% are just unaware of like livelihood opportunities that could be presented to them. Similarly, I think just covering a couple of quotes from the interviews from the sex workers in terms of their limited engagement with alternate livelihood opportunities. One of the sex workers, for example, mentioned they were part of a jewelry making program. They learned basic English, and really liked it for the fact that it is something that they could do from their home. So they did not have to really go outside and venture. And it was something that presumably paid them well, right? Because of something that was more of an in-demand market. But we also got some of the comments like they don't really understand the point of them taking up technical jobs given their very low base skill level, and also a sense of distrust from the perspective that they don't see why they would be working for someone else's profit. So there's this element of apprehension and doubt in terms of engaging with formal technical jobs as well. Thanks. Yeah, and I think just looking at also the key barriers for them to be able to adopt any alternate livelihood opportunities is also their ability to really work out and work through their dependencies. So there's two key categories of dependencies that came out strongly through the interviews with commercial sex workers. One is a sense of financial dependency. Most of these sex workers are actually supporting their partners and children, and in some cases families. So they are carrying a major financial responsibility, and hence naturally this coupled with the fact that they see themselves and they are really low skill and low in education. Their ability to take risks and venture to take an alternate livelihood is something that they are averse to, right? And they also see a fear of failing, for example. So there's this whole reluctance to kind of try because of some of the financial obligations and responsibilities they have. And needless to say, again, this has been exacerbated by COVID. So there's something that has also come out is that the perception of taking this financial risk and to really meet the dependencies today has been exacerbated through COVID. Similarly, there's also been dependency in terms of care. Many of these sex workers that we interviewed, specifically around 90% of them actually have their children. And they are wary of leaving their children unattended in the red light areas while they work. So that's something that they see as a major responsibility they need to take care of. One of the key factors that's also a part of this is in terms of dependencies, while they have a lot of obligations around financial and care responsibilities, they also do not have a supportive support structure or nurturing environment that can actually help them overcome some of these dependencies and some of the the barriers that they see in engaging. 65% of the sex workers we interviewed point that their families are unaware of their profession, or in some ways they're not in touch with their families. A lot of the sex workers in the red light districts of these three cities that we mentioned, they really come in from the various neighboring areas and have mostly since lost touch with their families in their original native places. And a majority of them hence also reported that they could not really go back to their families, even when the COVID-19 hit, because of the entrenched stigma that's there in their native places around sex work. In addition, another data point here that we figured was 52% of sex workers also could not list any support structure or a supporting person who they can really rely on in the pandemic. So that's something. It also tells us how weak their support systems are in their cities of residence, where they're typically living away from their families and some of their original kind of support systems that they were born with. And then, of course, there is a lack of accessibility of financially viable livelihoods is also seen as a key factor and key barrier for them to kind of take the plunge and take up and consider anything alternate. Right. So with this, we move on to a little bit on a few of the findings around what could be, a desirable alternate livelihood for commercial sex workers. And one of the few things that came out strongly was that 88% of our respondents said that they are willing and interested to consider an alternate livelihood opportunity, especially after the pandemic. So this is something that was really strongly came out. Um, and in going on in detail, a few characteristics that came out strongly of what they desire in an alternate livelihood was really good remuneration, right? So just ability to earn at least as much as what they're earning through their sex work is something that came out very strongly. It's also an element of desirability around doing dignified jobs and doing those jobs in a safe environment. So some of the more basic desires around being seen as an acceptable livelihood earner in the community, and to do it in a way that does not affect or does not really like put them in any place of lack of safety, maybe because of their background or them being like a woman. There's also an element of uh, preference towards doing non-technical jobs. And these jobs typically would be jobs that would require them to learn some of the technical stuff, whether it be learning learning digital, learning some of the more SOP oriented jobs that are currently out there. This is just coming from their own inference of how basically they have seen they see the desirable characteristics, and also they listed some of the ways in which some of the examples that they think of according to them would be good alternate livelihood options to them, which are very basic service oriented or product making kind of jobs, right? Like cooking, tailoring, stitching, packaging, working in a factory is something that also came out as one of the desired jobs, or making very small cottage industry kind of jobs like making candles, incense sticks, or jewelry, as we had noticed as part of one of the earlier quotes that we had. But I think the key takeaway is really that 88% of respondents are willing and interested to consider. Of the 12% respondents who were unwilling to consider or uninterested to take up an alternate livelihood, the key factors were one, clearly their age, right? And I mean, the first quote here kind of really signifies our finding, which basically uh, says that, hey, if I'm really that old, what do I have in me to kind of really learn something? What is the other kind of work that I could possibly do? And it's just one thing that we really know how to do. And um, they also don't like they also don't think that it will be a very easy transition or switch to make, so they're not interested kind of trying. um, some of the other reasons also are a need for a greater income, which is something that they don't think would be feasible through any other profession, at least at their stage. There's also an element of a perception that the sex work, since they've been doing, is relatively easy. So the current profession seems like an easier option to continue to lead, even though temporarily it may have been subjected to uh, a lot of distress in terms of carrying it out. But that's also one of the factors of why these 12% of respondents thought that uh, they would be uninterested to take it up. Right. And I think to quickly cover respondents, what they really aspire to in the longer run is really like an aspiration for themselves to really move out of the RLA and really be able to still meet their care and financial dependencies, as you've seen, is something that they see as a key aspiration for themselves. They would also want to earn enough money to clear off their debts, and we're going to cover this more when Dr. Beulah talks about the debt traps in greater detail. And they have an aspiration to do more dignified work moving out of the RLAs. For their family, a clear aspiration is to really break the cycle of working in the sex work. They want to ensure that the children don't end up being sex workers. They also want to break intergenerational cycle of sex work. 15% of the respondents in our survey mentioned that they are either children or grandchildren of sex workers themselves. So there's part of intergenerational sex work. Um, they also want their children to be educated and financially independent, hence they can support themselves. And similarly, for the community, their aspirations are more to make sure that anyone who does not want to be in sex work should not be in sex work is something that clearly came out. Uh, However, the critical dependencies they see as part of really making this transition is they'd want this transition to have monetary as well as non-monetary support. And monetary support includes covering their expenses for living expenses, and also their current financial dependencies and debt as a key monetary support that they look forward to be able to kind of engage. Of course, non-monetary support as well came out very strongly. The ability to actually move out of the RLA and hence have some sort of infrastructural support to be able to live outside the RLA, and also to be able to help out and really provide for the children the food, education, safety, etc. 75% of the respondents also mentioned that they would want to work in the same city as they currently live in for the opportunities it provides them, the fact that they have built some sort of a support system there in the city, while they don't have any in their native, or most of them don't have any in their native places. They've also spent most of the time in the city, and they think that they can access more amenities while being in those same cities. Have been the key findings in terms of their preference for location. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Thank you. Right. So I think just leaving this need assessment, that's it from our end. But I think one of the key things which is summarized through this quote from one of the sex workers is that if they really have an opportunity to leave the sex work in any way, they'll happily do it as long as they can take care of their dependencies of families and children, and they would want to earn a respectable living. So this really summed up like the aspirations of the community that we spoke to. But I do want to end this need assessment insight with a big thank you to all our need assessment partners who have worked with us across the 3 cities to make this successful across all the adversities we faced, whether it be in terms of access, but also through COVID and a lot of police restrictions while conducting the need assessment. So I want to thank Sabut Sangha from Kolkata. Want to thank Purnata, who helped us in Mumbai and Kolkata both. Also Katkatha, an organization which works at GB Road in Delhi. And Asta Parivar, who helped us out in conducting the needs assessment in the cities of Delhi and Mumbai.
Thank you, Nishkarsh. Really appreciate the insights from that needs assessment survey that was done. Next up, we have Dr. Beulah Shaker joining us. She's the Emeritus Professor of Criminology. She's the Director, Center for Empowerment and Women's Studies at MSU and the Special Officer, RTICM Cell and Local Fund Audit. She has served as a Juvenile Justice Board member for the 3 southern districts of Tirunelveli, Tuticorin, and Kanyakumari, and was the Director of the Childline Nodal Agency and the Sahodari Family Counseling Center project. We would request Dr. Beulah to share with the audience findings from her latest reports on death trap.
A very good afternoon to all of you. So this is the research that I would like to share with you, a death trap, a shadow pandemic for commercial sex workers, vulnerability and impact. So as an introduction, we all know that the lockdown situation due to COVID has created binding financial hardships, like we heard from the other speakers. And yes, there were earlier studies done as well as late as 2020, and which showed that commercial sex workers were forced to borrow more money, adding to their debt amount, then the average interest had increased from 12% to 5% during this period. So the period when they needed some assistance, they were charged more interest, and this is a kind of introduction to the study. So the purpose of this study obviously was to address the emerging yet neglected problem of financial exploitation faced by these commercial sex workers, and we tried to analyze and see the impact of the lockdown period on their lives. So to do these, we had certain objectives. One was to understand the demographic details of the major red light areas in India and to describe the basic needs of the commercial sex workers in the red light areas and examine their vulnerability. And we also wanted to analyze the on-ground financial situation and the fund flow in these red light areas and the impact that this had on the commercial sex workers. So we tried to analyze the long-term impact of the debt on the commercial sex workers. And finally, we tried to examine the need for economic empowerment of the commercial sex workers. So this, the methodology used was a rapid assessment method for obvious reasons, like we did not want to take too much of their time and because of the COVID situation as well. So the universe of the study comprised of the 5 red light areas in the 3 different cities. One was in Calcutta, the Sonagati, the one in Delhi was the GB Road red light area, then Burdwar Pet in Pune, Kamatipura in Mumbai, and Ganga Jamuna Nagar in Nagpur. So we used a convenient sampling technique in choosing these cities and the red light areas, and the snowball method helped in maximizing the respondents' participation. So we selected the samples using the snowball sampling method, and the size was the total of 5 research associates were given the task to assess these in the different cities. And the tools used were it was a structured tool. It took about a week to prepare, and then we did a testing, a kind of test to see if it was reliable and a valuable tool as well. And we took 2 days to train these research associates. And the data collection went on for about 3 months, say from April to mid of June. So the universe of the study were these different red light areas. So to just set the pace, we have about 45 lakh commercial sex workers in India. The total, if you could see from the last column, and the number of brothels were about 75,000. This was the universe of the study. So the sample size was about 174, which included commercial sex workers, about 120 of them. Then the informers, the madams of the brothels, the brothel keepers, the managers were about 31, the social workers, some researchers, and child welfare committees, shelter home superintendents. These were the people who also responded to our questions. And we had to be very careful about the ethical concerns, especially with the COVID and with the victims being, some of them victims of trafficking, some of them victims of various forms of abuse. So we informed them about the purpose of the study. So informed verbal consent of all the respondents were taken, and they were informed about all the risks involved. Some of them were incentivized by giving some of the rations for the time, because their time is very precious for them, even during this time when they lacked other means of livelihood. So the rights of the respondents, the cultural values, all these were taken into consideration, and the response of all the respondents were properly protected for confidentiality and privacy as well. To safeguard any possibility of leakage of sensitive data, the data collection process avoided audio or video recording, and during the telephonic interviews, no personal details were sought, so that the call wouldn't be linked with the respondent. And because of the, most importantly, because of the COVID situation, the standard operating procedures were, and all the safety norms were also followed. So coming to the findings, we saw the financial impact on commercial sex workers. In Mumbai, Nagpur, and Delhi, the respondents said that they need the money their need for money was so great during this time that some of them secretly engaged in sex work during the lockdown. So they risked their lives and the social distancing, and they revealed that they had indulged in sex work during this period as well. So the majority of the respondents were not able to leave the red light areas during this time because we were wanting to know if they tried to leave and go home to their families. But they said because of the recurring deaths and the brothel keepers were keen that they got back their money which was due to them during this period. So they were not able to leave the floor, leave the red light area as well. And so they had no alternative source of income. So the larger loan amounts were selectively given to the much older and more trusted commercial sex workers, which constituted about 20% of the total number in the red light area. And average interest rate, like was found earlier in an earlier study, was risen from 7 to 12%. So, and the monthly earnings and expenditure, we try to find out what they did with the earnings and how they went about spending it. So one of the respondents from Nagpur stated that minor victims are likely to earn about 70,000 per month, and for majors above 18, it would be about 50,000 per month. And what they did with their earnings is what we also tried to gather from them. We found out that 50% of the earnings went to the brothel keeper for the rent and their upkeep as well. Then on an average, the respondents are left with about 12 to 15,000 for their expenses, and they out of that they had to send to the family. They addressed their daily needs with that, and they also repaid the debts that they had collected there. So in situations where brothel keepers pay for the maintenance, like basics like electricity and water, and then this money was also deducted from their earnings. So the respondents had to incur that expense as well. And the loans taken from the PIMS before the coronavirus. So we tried to look at the amount and the interest rate. So like in the previous study, 90% of them and all of them would had loans of about 60,000 to 1 lakh from the managers, and they tried to repay it, and the repayment was larger than the loan amount given to them because of the high interest rate. But this could have also been because it was undocumented contracts, there were oral agreements, and the respondents had also lost track of payments. So these are reasons why they repaid more than they had, much more than what they had initially borrowed. And the big brothels where the respondents were charging comparatively more from clients, their loans would be more than 1 to 2 lakhs. So one of the respondents in Pune, we like to call her Narmada, after some of the rivers, we have to pay a regular installment to the brothel keepers or money lenders. These things go in our mind even when we are performing sexual acts with our clients. I think of the repayment of debt all the time. So this is predominantly their worry from what we gathered from their responses. And also during the lockdown, the process of taking instant loans with high interest for managers was very common, and it was very, very strictly managed for these commercial sex workers as well. So the money lenders, the brothel keepers, they required commercial sex workers to actively engage in repayment of the loans on a timely basis. And when this was happening, the focus was on it kind of psychologically shifted from the short-term repayment, and it took them away from the long-term debt bondage and exploitation. Like they were not aware of what would happen in the long term. They were just worried about repaying the debt immediately. So another respondent, we'd like to call her Inda Pune, said that anything that we were not able to pay was added up to the loan. The room rent, the daily food, the toiletries, the essentials, medicines, masks, gloves, and every small thing is added to the loan. The debt is increasing daily with higher interest, and we feel worried, said one of the respondents. So there are the demographics which we also tabled here, but due to lack of time, I would move on to the main finding of the study. Prediction of the long-term sex workers and the impact of the debt that they are taking. So we looked at it in three scenarios. Scenario one is if the lockdown is released by 31st May, what would happen? Scenario two is if the lockdown is extended up to 3 months till June, what would happen? And finally, if there's no work for up to 9 months till the 31st of December, what would happen? So looking at this, the scenario, the debt repayment without the impact of COVID, that itself would have been if you look at the x-axis, the month, and the y-axis shows the amount. So in 50 months, they would have had to pay about 1,20,000, even without the COVID situation, and if there were regular trades going on. So now coming to scenario one, what would happen if the debt repayment within 2 months of the lockdown and 3 months of slowed business because of the COVID, the business was down and the interest was more. So their interest obviously in the next 154 months would have gone up to 4 lakhs. So this is the way it has almost doubled in an year because of the lack of income plus the rate of interest. So the second scenario we saw was the repayment if the lockdown extended up to June, that is 3 months of slowed down business. Here again, in say 240 months, it would come up to more than 14 lakhs. So this would be their repayment in 14 lakhs. So coming to the last scenario, up to December 2020, what we see is the debts would be more than 6 lakhs, 60 lakhs, sorry. So as time goes and the loss of business happens, the debt repayment becomes almost impossible. So they are caught in this kind of a debt burden. And there's another table here which we try to show how the amount is extrapolated, and it seems like they will be in a debt trap. And this is akin to the modern day slavery. So we see that the movement of this whole lot of commercial sex workers, they're going into an indefinite bonded labor situation. And like we heard from the previous speakers, none of them want their children to be involved in it. But it looks like this is what will happen if this kind of thing goes on and they do not have an alternate profession. So we see that it is estimated that we're pushing about 1 crore 66,000 women into the modern day slavery in a month's time. And coming to the limitations of the study, we see that the rapid assessment method had its limitations, and also a few respondents were struggling to provide the exact estimates of the economic details, etc., because they did not have any record. And then the commercial sex workers were also found to be more inclined to engage with customers in spite of the government's regulations, and also poor response rate due to the associating factors of the perception of fear of victimization by the brothel keepers. They're very, very cautious what they said to us. So yes, from this we had some recommendations, designing a compelling reinvention model for red light areas to mitigate the risks of health crisis and economic debt bondage, because this we have to be proactive in trying to figure something out for the commercial sex workers, and we need to ensure that the high level of awareness among the sex workers and provide a list of schemes for their utilization. They're not aware of what the government schemes are. There is, and there should be a task force at the center, state and district and local level. And also we need to implement the existing laws against predatory money lenders. In Tamil Nadu, we have the Gundas Act, which covers the money lenders and their exorbitant interest, but we have to implement these laws, and we need to break this chain of debt bondage by providing alternate livelihood plans that identify for them and establish a financial secure employment for them. And we need also to establish fully functional rehabilitation centers and create awareness, prepare them, do some capacity building to facilitate their future employment or entrepreneurship that they would love to be involved in. Then government needs to design local intervention programs through social service unit to break the supply chain of victims from the source areas as well. Then participation of sex workers as change makers is very important, like what Nagma was saying. We need to have them on the table when we're talking about them. They need to be part of us. The participation is very important. So also the mass media drive to be initiated to make commercial sex workers feel heard, and also understand the need to change, and society's mindset also to be more accepting of former commercial sex workers. Then we need to ensure the revised scheme. There are schemes and guidelines from the central sector as well and the government of India, but we need to implement these schemes and the guidelines. And the center and the state government assistance, they have assistance schemes for land allotment, development, provision of low-cost housing, animal health husbandry, and a lot of schemes. But again, like we said, the awareness is lacking for all these schemes. So we need to provide immediate earnings to sustain intensive skilling. Also needs to be skill-based training needs to be given, counseling and soft skills need to be given. And this is just a picture of a mural that we have in our home, and it was done by commercial sex workers who have found an alternate profession, and this is done in a place in Kerala called Kozhikode, Nilambur. So this is one of the success stories. So they have learned the trade of making this terracotta mural, and they have a skill now, an alternate profession. So we as society, we owe it to them to give them a better life after all these years of victimization. Yes, maybe the second time around, at least they need to have a better life. Maybe by chance or by choice, they were in this profession. And we have named the commercial sex workers after rivers in all these, in our paper as well. So like the rivers, they, after serving the society and satisfying the needs of all the users, and when they're no longer needed, they fall into the sea, lose themselves in the sea, contaminated, and merge with the salt water. So we need to, like the aim of this webinar, to find an alternate profession for them. So this is another picture of the mural that is made out of the terracotta tiles, and is with the help of these commercial sex workers as an alternate profession. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Buda. And I see that we have quite a few questions for you, so we will be fielding those during the Q&A. And this is a reminder to all of our guests to continue to engage with all our speakers via the chat option, and we are taking down your questions and we will address them during the session later on. Next up, though, we have a very special guest joining us, Dr. Manish Kumar, who's the Managing Director and CEO of NSDC. He has demonstrated a history of working in the nonprofit organization management industry. He has a PhD focused in institutional and regulatory economics of public-private partnerships from the George Washington University, a master in public administration from Harvard University, and engineering from IIT ISM Dhanbad. Sir, I would be very honored that if you could to share your views on the need and the opportunity to design a holistic model for CSWs.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be part of this conversation. I think touching a very important issue during the lockdown, and I've been listening to some of the presentation. It's I think very important that we, through whatever means that we have and the capability each of us have, contribute to this important task of how do we safeguard people who are most vulnerable in our society. What could we do to make things better for them? I think that's an issue which strongly needs to be reflected by all of us. In NSDC, we are focused on skill development and ensuring that the skills lead to sustainable employment for people. The kind of skills that we impart is essentially short-term skills. The income bracket that we look for normally is essentially the bottom 25% of India's income profile. That's where we want to focus the most, and then the next income quartile. Of course, we have opportunity for those above too, but I think our focus is mostly on those who are really poor and who can, by developing their skills, enhance their income and become better in terms of human capital and for the future generations. So that's what we look for. And obviously, the things that we do, I think chimes very well with what we could do in the present context that we are talking of victims of human trafficking and the difficulties that they face, the various kind of debts that were spoken about that becomes almost unsustainable for them to bear, and the fact that it's a kind of modern day slavery eventually, and we need to do something to get them out of it. So a few things which I would like to suggest. Um, in each of these places that we've spoken of and in different parts of India, I'm aware that there are many NGOs who work with them. In fact, some of them who face a lot of difficulty and who actually work with us directly approached us. NSDC have been working with some of the commercial sex worker in the past too. We have skilled people in Delhi and we've put them to jobs, mostly unarmed security guard. That's the kind of jobs we provided in the past. And some people from Calcutta had also approached us, and we ensured at least that the basic minimum were reaching them during the time when there was a complete lockdown, using our network, using our influence through our training partners. So I think in the current time, few of the things which I would like to suggest is the NGOs that work with them, if they could begin to focus a little more on skill development. I know some of them are already doing that. Some of my friends from Calcutta have been working on this, and I think there is a need for doing more on that. We have found from evidence that the short-term skilling that we do, which is about 3 months minimum to maybe sometimes going up to 6 months, um, usually you have to spend about 4 hours every day to learn that. And in case a person has difficulty in going out to learn because of time constraint, it's possible to deliver them digitally through the digital platforms. And if a person has difficulty in understanding that in English language, then we have those trainings in 9 different languages. And these are not sophisticated things. These are relatively less sophisticated, but very structured. So even if simple things like if it was about somebody wanting to understand about how do you become a good retail sales associate, we have a course on that. Or if you wanted to learn about mushroom cultivation, we have actually a course on that. And there are various kinds. We have over 2,500 different courses, and most of them, as I said, are targeted towards the bottom income profile and therefore suitable in the current context. The choice is of the individual. If it's a 10th pass person, then there could be even IT related jobs that are available. And I'm aware of girls in Bhubaneswar who actually are about 10th pass, and they actually help in data inputs that help drive the driverless cars in California. So that's potential in today's world, that girls from rural Bhubaneswar are contributing to driving of driverless cars in California. So it can be so interesting in that sense, and there's so much opportunity. So I think what I was trying to say is these 3 months courses eventually lead to jobs that get you between 9,000 to 15,000, depending on places, more towards the lower side. And we often actually argue that the private sector needs to pay them better, but that's of course a function of economy. Yet it does lead to independence, a sense of independence that comes in. And also given the nature of India's economy, I've noticed that once you have certification in your hand, and this I emphasize very strongly, once you have certification in your hand from a government agency, the employment opportunity for that person increases because you become mobile. It's possible for you that if you are not employed by a particular individual, you can go and speak to another. And when they ask you that, okay, show me a proof of your ability, you actually have a proof in your hand, which was lacking in the past. So I think certification through NSDC partners, using that to your advantage, I would encourage that very strongly. So far as training itself is concerned, I mentioned about 2,500 different job roles. I will encourage NGOs that work with in such areas, trying to rehabilitate commercial sex workers. If they could focus on taking up job roles that will be suitable, and you could actually do a bit of counseling to get a sense of what is suitable. We have even devised psychometric tests to understand which person is suitable for what kind of job role. So, for example, we have noticed a lot of people wanting to work in healthcare, but eventually, when they land up in healthcare, they actually run away. And then that's the reason why we devised the psychometric test, because we found that if your reason for getting into healthcare was money, then probably that's the wrong way to approach a job. Because the moment that person encountered difficulties that you might have to face in healthcare, he or she found their empathy level not strong enough to actually work in healthcare sector. So what we do in this psychometric test is trying to identify that different jobs require different attributes. If you're in healthcare, you require more of empathy level. So if in our psychometric test, you're going to score 90 out of 100 in empathy score, and you say that I'm interested in healthcare, we will tell you that, yes, please go ahead. You look like the right person for that. But if you're scoring 10 out of 100 and you said you want to go to healthcare, we'll probably tell you that that's not the right thing for you. You would probably not be able to withstand the difficulties that come with healthcare. So that's the kind of counseling we do, and you could pick that up with us, and then through a structured way, we could actually enable the NGOs to have the equipment and the master trainers that are necessary for skilling individuals, and then we'll try and connect you to government resources, which ensures that the training goes free of cost to any of the recipient, and then 3 months to 6 months down the line, when the person has finally been trained, assessed, we also do assessment, and it's done by a third party, and we provide certification. We want to ensure when that happens, that after your certification, we got a portal actually that matches the demand and supply of jobs. And even to that extent, we'll extend facility support to you to look for jobs around the places that the person lives in. If something, because I usually have found that people are scared of mobility, and more so during the current time, it's quite possible for us to actually look for jobs that are suitable for a person near to the home. Just to give you an example of what we have done in that, if you go to our portal, which is called ASEEM portal, which is a very simple one, it's a directory of skilled worker. But then at the back end is this demand side, private sector looking for people to work in various trades, from logistics to retail to as I said, 37 different sectors. So there is a matching that occurs. And between 10th of July, when we initiated that portal, till today, we have provided job offers to 10 lakh people, which is a large number. And this is what we look forward to doing for you too. I think these were a few thoughts which I wanted to share. I'm quite motivated by all the initiative being shown by all of you, Satwa, for leading this great initiative. And I would be very, very keen to be part of the initiative that you come up with, and provide you our fullest support to take it forward, including giving you details of people whom we trained in the past, and giving an idea of what they're doing today, so that they become role models, and they are the ones who can actually bring about change that you're looking for. So thank you once again for inviting me, and I really look forward to being part of your initiative. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you very much, sir. And on that note, we would now begin the panel discussion round. I request Ms. Aarti Mohan to introduce the panel and the objectives of the discussion.
Thanks so much, Alicia. Manisha, thank you so much. That was a very illuminative discussion where you've laid out so many different things that MSD is already doing, and really looking forward to see how some of those could be leveraged, and how we could connect more as we go along in this journey of figuring out how do we design effective and scalable initiatives for alternate livelihoods among CSWs. I would love to start with we have a very eminent panel here with us today. would really be great to have all of you switch on your videos if you haven't done so already. I have here with me Amit Garg, the country manager at Global Fund for Ending Modern Slavery. Amit has been at the forefront of designing and informing several philanthropic investments and bilateral aid programs on skill and livelihood over the last 10 years. Prior to his current engagement with the GFEM's India and Bangladesh initiatives, Amit has been looking at the philanthropy portfolio of Credit Suisse in India and sustainability initiatives for the Godrej Group quite closely. We have with us Partha Pratim Majumdar, who's the chairman of ASSOCHAM Skill Council. He brings in strong specialization across inclusivity, education, higher education, and turnkey projects. And he has been key in bringing Muktiralo to life, a comprehensive government scheme for rehabilitation of sex workers and to quell sex trafficking in West Bengal. Gitanjali Babbar is the founder and director of Katkata, and she comes to us with years of experience in engaging closely with the community on the ground. And given that we've had so many different thoughts around having someone from the CSW community talk in the panel, it would be really great, Geeta, if you could represent some of those perspectives and we can quickly follow through with those conversations with CSWs themselves. So she has been working with the community to integrate them into mainstream livelihood choices. We also have Lakshmi Pattabhiram, who has over 15 years of experience in the corporate sector before joining the Nudge, where she is looking at collective impact projects. So would love to get started with that. Alicia, if you could have the panelists on the screen overall. Amit, would love to begin with you. And given that you've been working so closely in bringing together multi-stakeholder initiatives, which are a different level of complexity and preparation compared to what we today traditionally look at as programmatic interventions, and given the complexity of solving for several of the aspects from the even giving them agency to seek alternative opportunities should they wish to do so, to then looking at building skills and then integrating them. Would love to understand, Amit, what do you see as learnings from GFEMs and your own thoughts on how do we bring together an initiative like this? What would be the key things we should be thinking of?
Sure. And again, thank you so much for inviting me. I just wanted to add, I'm former GFEMs. I'm not at GFEMs anymore. But I guess one way to look at this is to say that what do we mean by alternative livelihoods? And that's why I was actually keen on asking when you were reading out the results from your own study, how the question on alternative livelihoods was framed. Often what we understand as alternative livelihoods may not translate across languages and across barriers. So I'm just keen on looking at what that is. And the second question, and the second aspect for me, and again, I can bring in some of the GFEM's research on this, is that over the sort of roughly 2.5 years of funding programs across India and Bangladesh, approximately about an $18 million portfolio, the one singular learning, if I can call it that, is the fact that a lot of this vulnerable workforce is not visible. That I feel is the number one challenge to look at this. So, and which is why there is no agency to some extent. I'm here talking largely about migrant workers who are taking up construction-related jobs or other low-skill jobs. I'm also talking about commercial sex workers who are mostly also from different communities than where they are currently operating in. So they would have also migrated. And just by virtue of that, their migration, their agency would have reduced already. And then compounded by the fact that this is an audience which in any case has, if I can call it that, a very low, very low set of documentation, if I can call it that. And I mean, even simple things like, for example, we realize that while everybody has an Aadhaar card, and on the basis of which you can get a few government schemes, the phone number on your Aadhaar card is not the one that you're using. And while it's a trivial problem for like most of us, most construction workers and sex workers will not have time to go and chase down an agency who will change their phone number. Similarly, we found that I think, if I remember correctly, about 28% of all construction workers that we targeted through our intervention, which is closely about 100,000, about 28% of them did not have a bank account. Despite what the government will tell you. So, or at least they feel they don't have a bank account. So while the government thinks that there is a bank account, they don't know that they have a bank account. We also have a lot of cases where bank accounts, even though were opened, have largely been not operated, and hence have now become dormant. So again, my basic sense of this comes from the fact that to build that agency, you need to recognize human beings as citizens. You need to recognize these human beings as citizens. And the one thing that allows you to become citizens is by having a basic set of documentation, which will allow you to have government schemes. So I'll stop there for now, but maybe we can come back to this again. Thanks, Arti.
Thanks, Amit. Would love to follow up with that to see how, something along on the funder side, but would come back to you
Sure.
on that. Would love to go over to Lakshmi. Given, I mean, as Manish ji pointed out, and what our studies also revealed, if skills and employability, pursuing the journey of figuring out where they can join in the workforce or what entrepreneurship they can pursue is a very critical part and beginning to that journey of even looking at alternative livelihoods. What do you think might be considerations in terms of designing skill and entrepreneurship training for CSWs, and can they integrate into some of the current scaling programs that we already have, Lakshmi? And I'd love to also understand how do we bring, given we need so many different diverse players to kind of come in to support an initiative like this from the supply side, what are your thoughts also on bringing together these kind of diverse expertise to support CSW?
Sure. Thank you, Aarti. Thank you, everyone, for having me here. So, Aarti, on the question of livelihoods and placements and entrepreneurship, job opportunities, I think while typically, classically, for most communities, what we start with is a demand side constraint, as one of my colleagues often calls it, where what are the right employers, how do you place them, at what salary levels or what income levels. I think here the situation is doubly complicated, because I think there are equal number of supply side constraints, probably even more supply side constraints. How do you get them ready, or how do you get them to even enter a stage where they're ready to get into the job market, right? And because very complex, it's not just financial problems that you're trying to solve here. Completely intertwined with social, psychological barriers as well. So I think in any skilling program or opportunity that we're looking at for this community, we'll have to really look at the nuances of where that community is operating, what are the conditions under which they're operating, and what holds them back from being gainfully employed sustainably in alternate professions. But having said that, I think what we need to look at is kind of customized solutions depending on the community, the age group of the community that you're working with, older people, younger people. I mean, are there barriers that younger people face that older people perhaps don't face? And therefore, what support systems one might have to customize as they enter into employment, and if you want them to stay employed. By that, what I mean is, you will, of course, have to work with employers. You'll have to sensitize them. You will have to sensitize other people in their workplaces, possibly even have to sensitize potential customers, right? I mean, if we've had experiences where people in the past, where if you were looking at a driving job, employers may be willing, but then always issues come up in what would my customers think about it, etc. So sensitizing customers as well. And maybe those require communication campaigns that are very targeted at behavior change acceptability, bringing certain dignity to the the work that they used to do. But I think also another point to keep in mind is, how do you backstop slide backs, right? These could be hard backstops. These could be softer aspects to this. And today, yes, there is severe loss of income thanks to the pandemic. But one of the other, pre-pandemic, one of the big issues is, would I earn the same level of income that I earn by doing commercial sex work in any of the jobs that I'm placed at in an alternate livelihood, right? But how do you backstop it? And not just financially, it can't be purely financial. So softer aspects, and softer aspects could be things like counseling, helplines, support for children, whatever else their aspirations are. So those are some things I think we will have to keep in mind. And possibly the other thing is to work with the community, because some of these questions have come up in the Q&A as well. There are power structures that exist within the communities that could actually provide deep resistance to moving them out to alternate livelihoods. So possibly look for solutions that emerge from the community. We'll have to customize it, working with the existing power structures. So is it entrepreneurship where, which might be where you work within the community with existing power structures, or would you look at employment but see how you can move people away? So some thoughts from my end. No expert on the community that we would like to serve in the project, but just some thoughts and learnings from our work at the Nudge.
Thanks, Lakshmi. That great segue into what I wanted Geeta to sort of touch upon. Geeta, like Lakshmi mentioned, there are power structures that exist within the community that seem, and Dr. Viola's research and our research also points to, they may be seeking alternative livelihoods, but where's the agency to even, look for it, right? Like, can they, how do they, within the system that they are entrenched in, be able to seek an alternative form of livelihood if they choose to? And would love to. And secondly, given that the design of such a system needs to be flipped to have the community develop that agency to support and make it sustainable. Else there could be a slip back. So we might need, in all probability, a lot of the people from the community themselves become champions in supporting the design and successful embedding of any kind of initiative that we will design around livelihoods. Would love for you to touch upon both these aspects of looking for the alternative livelihood choice.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be a part of such discussions, because we rarely talk about this thing. Maybe because of pandemic and because of all the media attention, and I don't know about what happened in the past few years that finally we are here talking about a long-term sustainable model for sex workers. So I'm very happy that this is happening. It's been 10 years since I am working inside the brothels of GB Road, and one thing which I have realized is very clear, that one model will not work. If we feel that, okay, this is the model which is going to work from end to end, we have champions are going to go into the brothels, and they will motivate women. I mean, there will be days when the champions will come to you and they will say, hello, whatever you are doing is, you're just earning your own money, you're just making your own project, and you're not working for us. Sometimes the champions will be abused by the community, and they will tell the champion that you are doing for money, because the psychological, I would say those women have been hit badly at a psychological level since the childhood. So for them, trusting anyone becomes the most difficult thing in their life. And to trust you is the challenge. Once that trust is formed, and trust me, that trust sometimes it takes 9 to 10 years to build with even one woman. And even then you're not very sure. Even if you have you're continuing with few people, even then you don't know what will happen after 6 or 7 years. If the police come, some raid will happen, and your whole project will just collapse. So one suggestion from my experience is that no matter what you design, always just surrender it. I mean, I know surrender words, many people takes it in a very negative way. That how can you surrender? We have a great plan, we have everything in place. But when you are working in such an area, you will have to surrender it. You can plan to a certain extent, and that's what I've been sharing even during the surveys. Because, like, if I talk about GB Road, there are 4,000 women, and 4,000 women have different experiences. They have different stories to tell. They have different expectations. Not all 4,000 will come and tell you that, okay, I want to become a driver, or I want to do an alternative livelihood, or I even envision a different life. So every life in a red light area is a project in itself. And if we are committing to such a project, then we have to be extremely, we have to focus on every minute details. That's what my suggestion, that's what my experience says. And that is the reason that I've also realized that in such projects, scale generally never works. Because you're dealing with individuals. हर बच्चा और हर औरत अपने आप में एक इंडिविजुअल है. तो हम लोग यहाँ पे we talk about bringing change into lakhs of women or hundreds of women in 2 years and 5 years. Yes, if a lot of experts come together, if government comes together, if everybody, the whole ecosystem comes together, then definitely it can happen. And in that ecosystem, the pimps have to be with you. The women have to be with us. The children have to be with us. The community, which is not letting that women come out, the neighbors of that community also needs to be sensitized. And of course, the larger public, which always feels कि sex workers हैं, तभी हमारे देश में रेप के रेट्स कम हैं. मतलब रेप के अभी फिर भी रेप कम है. That's what the larger society feel. कि अगर रेड लाइट डिस्ट्रिक्ट चले जाएंगे तो रेप्स बढ़ जाएंगे. एक नॉर्मल लड़की को भी लड़के रेप के लिए करेंगे. सो व्हेन जब तक ये सब मेंटालिटी रहेंगी, तब तक our women will also keep feeling that in this lifetime, if we will not serve the men properly, we are not serving the community, because that's what is being put in their head. So I would say we have to like start from like a baby, no? जैसे हम छोटे बच्चे के साथ जैसे शुरू करते हैं. This is how we need to have plans for every woman and every child on that road. What they have gone through in the past, what they're expecting in the future, what is their present state of mind, what do they think about livelihood, are they scared, are they too confident, do they want money? So it's a detailed thing which needs to be taken care before we jumped into something.
Got it. No, I hear you say that involving the community in the design of the programs and models that are going to come in, and customizing for nuanced needs rather than sweeping it is critical. Yeah. But I also want to go over to Partha to understand, given that the size of the denominator in this case of the community is fairly extensive, what can we, in what ways can we have funders playing a role in the, in supporting this, sir, from your experience of working with ASSOCHAM, and what are some of the learnings from the program that you've been leading in West Bengal, to say how do we also look at this in a scalable way? I'm not able to see. I'm not sure if you've turned on your video.
Mr. Partha, can you switch on your video again for us, please?
Yes. Great. Yes, sir. You're on mute. You're on mute.
Is it okay right now?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Very, very good afternoon to all of you. To start with, what I suggest, lots of wonderful and right points were discussed, and most of the speakers have really touched the chord. In my experience of this particular social sector drives initiatives covering skill development in not only West Bengal, but in eastern part of India, covering Odisha and Assam as well, for the last 30 years, and touching upon, right now I am in ASSOCHAM as chairman, but I had been in to Bengal Chamber CII earlier. And my main idea was to three things: that entire society is driven by the there are four pillars. One is definitely society. All decision making is done in combination with the four pillars. One is society, but main three pillars who are really in a policy intervention level are none other than government. That's one. Number two is definitely industry or industry forum, premier industry forum like CII, FICCI, ASSOCHAM, then Bengal Chamber, and so many. So that is number two. And industry forum means it is the coverage of industries. So this 1, 2, 3, then finally is academia. So when I understood it, that academia has a role to play, because education is our, when India was got independence in 1947, kindly appreciate the situation. And today, anywhere you go, in any part of India and in any district, you will find people are more thought that education will make my life wonderful, education will make life beautiful, and I will be having my livelihood. So skill did not have that importance as far as education is concerned. So a graduate or a MA or PhD or a B.Ed for being a teacher is a phenomenal focus in the particular in the eastern part of India and northeast also. Now coming to the, your point, before that I would like to just thank three observations. First is in the discourse, particular discourse, that PPT, why we was talking about aspiration, interviewed aspirations understood by him during interview with the CSW people. There is the expectation or aspiration is good remuneration and life. I don't find any difference between this aspiration of CSW and college students. When I was with the college, I found the same thing they are telling. What's the expectation? We want to have a good remuneration, good. So it is a human expectation. We should live better. That's all. Number one. Number two, I really like this Mr. Amit Garg's idea that whatever we are discussing and will be implementing, for whom? Who are the people? The people who live, or people who would be living with honor and respect the way with the other people. The wonderful word he has identified, and that's a huge, you can say, pitfall in our society, that is lack of documentation of these kind of people. In total, there are 6 lakhs of people as per UNAIDS surveys concerned in 2016 across India. It is not my data, it is the data of UNAIDS, United Nations. And as far as Bengal is concerned, and the biggest brothel of Asia, that is Sonagachi, having 7,000 this kind of women living in the big brothel full of multi-storied buildings, because these buildings were made more than 100 to 150 years back. Now, if you see, these Sonagachi people 2 years back made a history. They came up that they are not going to give any vote, because few people have voters card, but a lot of people do not have voters card. Lots of people. So they said that we would be voters card will definitely consider to that voters voting right is our right. But why? We will be requesting Election Commission to put there is an option that it is not a choice amongst the candidates. It is a choice of nota. We shall not vote. See the frustration. See the pathetic situation. So this is the situation of the people whom we are working with. So when Swarnabha made a call to me, I said the task is first is it's a micro at the micro and macro level is a huge and humongous task, not impossible, but very, 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 very tough. Now coming to the point of Bengal's this particular CFW related work, when I was in basically in academic institutions or the first B school of India, IISWBM, and then I found is a craze of getting good jobs in getting for good people, for good society, and young boys are coming, and the people parents are getting loans for that only. So then I decided, let us take care of those people. Nobody takes care of them. So when this has happened, so the new government came in 2011, and this Nota, this Sonagachi movement came up. Then they decided to go for Mukti Alo by Department of Women and Child Welfare. Fine. Now when they develop it, no, we should take care of them. There are so many thousands of people, and particularly poor women, mostly trafficked. So when they decided it, and because of seeing this kind of observation that Nota would be our choice, if we are not given, nobody takes care of us, we shall also not take care of the democracy. That was a alarming situation. So government of West Bengal, and this is the first time they thought about it, that we should take care of them. So alternative livelihood mission option was thought about in the name of a project called Mukti Alo. Now the wonderful part is this, what after that kind of research and all IS officers, all directors, all the ministers thought about it, and what is the final result? For particular alternative livelihood, they decided only 3 trades. So pathetic that one trade is spices grinding. Since mostly are illiterate, so spices grinding. Number 2 is to take care of a small tea cafe, tea cafe, where tea will be served with some snacks and all. The name of the cafe given, Divine Script, and that script is no longer there. Number 3, another, and these destitute women, particularly these sex workers, will be were given the responsibility of waitress and kind of counter person and some food cook and all. But it did not happen at all. Then this kind of, and another is block print. In the women's dress and all, block prints are used by them, because skill is an important area where that is not there, and that you can understand, as NSDC MD rightly said, that they have 2,500 courses, and I'm really very thorough about it. All courses start, minimum education must be class 5, and that is only for male, and that is called painter workman, and that painter workman model needs 5. So people do not bother, and minimum skill level education is class 8 for tailoring or all. So this is the situation. So ultimately it started with a big hue and cry, and slowly it died down. So this happened in 2014, and this new government came in 2011. Now in between, I created 2 models, and that is robust and very famous in Bengal. That is called, I found that tailoring is the typical women's favorite item, and that training is looked after, and that's taken care of in 1,000 schools. After class, a girl reaches at class 9 or 10, particularly minority. So once they are taking care of their, so livelihood or not, whatever, they will be getting certificate, and that is at no future. So personally, we connected through Bengal Chamber, Raymond company. Raymond, one of the largest player, having 750 showrooms, 17,500 crores company, and we connected through Chief Minister, and ultimately it was a result-oriented model. So
Sure,
we
sir. So just, I mean, no, not completely. I mean, looks, would love to, I mean, just given that we're running out of time, if you could just give us also a couple of learnings on how the market side or the industry came in from the ASOCAM perspective, then we'd love to go over to
no, fine. That is the
some of
point
the
I'm telling
questions. We
you.
have a lot of questions that have come in.
No, so the point is this, that aspiration, that means that that skill should take up to their aspiration level high. That's one. Second is, as far as money is concerned or funding is concerned, I'm telling you, this is a huge program, so it should not be very small level operation. It should be, there would be, Gitanjali rightly said, there are two levels. One level is of big model covering entrepreneurship. We should follow the model done by Hindustan Unilever, HUL. They have a Shakti Amma project in Andhra Pradesh. They started with it in 2015, and now today is 1 lakh in total. That is a destitute woman taking care of the dealership. So this is a self-entrepreneurship model where they would be endless of earning, and once they penetrate it through their own language, that is also a model can be followed. That's one. And second is, there are multiple scheme documents. They're lying with a lot of agencies, Ministry of Government of India's departments and state governments also. In Bengal, there's a model called Swami Vivekananda Swarojgar Prakalp that can be utilized by them. And in Ministry of Ayush, there's a model that can be also utilized by them. So there is a total research
Implementation on the ground that can help.
That is the point I'm telling you. Implementation, you see, money boils down money. So the funding is important. Fund is already there. Already they are funding, but people do not know, and our role is to connect, study and connect them, and it will be done because the money is there. As an NSDC is formed with 15,000 crores funding, so it is there. Now they are taking care of the lot of possibilities. Slowly it has been a big player here. So my point is this, it can be done, and Hindustan HUL's model can be followed for a greater number, larger number, and penetrating in the districts, penetrating in the rural areas. As you know, 75% of India is full of villages, 6 lakh villages. So if we connect Dabur, if we connect Imami, if we connect all FMCG players, Hindustan Liver, so my idea goes that moderator. So my idea goes that this can be
Moderated by.
Sorry, there's some noise in the background.
So my point is
why don't I just yes.
So and last point I would like to tell you that during I told to Swarnabha also during a recent speech of Prime Minister Atmanirbharta Abhiyan to our sub chamber of commerce, I heard that what he pointed out that makes sense. Because some less skilled people with a low profile products, we can connect with MSME, and this would be taken care of by GEM, government e-marketplace. So ultimately, livelihood linkage is the final position, but through giving them jobs may not make sense. We have to create the industry requirement so that we can feed them with our this kind of trained boys and girls, particularly girls, so that they can use their utilize their skill and get their remuneration. At the same time, they can compete with the market and get the product sold. So there are 3 levels of
sir, I'm just for a few more questions, sir. Can we just go to that and come back to you, sir? Just in the interest of time. I'm sure, I mean, would love to hear from you, but there are just a few questions from the audience. So would really love to go take some of those and come right back to you. Would love for Amit to come in here. Amit, there are questions around understanding the viability of how do we make sure that solutions are both at scale and viable? Any thoughts from the kind of approaches you've taken in your program?
Sure. So I think we need to think through which part of the solution can be scaled up fairly quickly, because again, donors also require some early wins to be able to build that story. And the second one, I think, is a more policy and a systems level change, which I agree with Gitanjali that I don't think are as easily scalable as building thousands of toilets and things like that. So I think from a donor landscape lens, the first thing I think we should potentially think of doing is making this audience more visible. And I keep coming back to the fact that CSR, for example, has been led to believe that building millions of toilets will solve open defecation problem. And they've been led to believe that giving money to Akshay Patra will feed all the children in the world. My point is that we don't have a story like that. We don't have anything with that sort of language in this very complex problem. And hence, what I would like to ideally think of is at least in the short term to be able to leverage the many government schemes that are available already, just to be able to connect. And I can actually name one example. This is a scheme that we actually tried out. This is called Swanidhi loan or something. It's a zero collateral 10,000 rupee loan given to street vendors and even potential street vendors. So my point is, from a donor standpoint, this sort of stuff becomes very interesting because it's immediately implementable, and can show you some quick wins and can show you some quick turnarounds. However, I still come back to the fact that the biggest problem we are dealing with is that this audience is invisible. As per our laws, sex work is not even recognized as work, and hence for the foreseeable future, we are not having any form of social security for this workforce, if you can call it a workforce. And that, I believe, is the largest systemic issue which we have to solve at some point in time. But again, I come back to the point that from a donor landscape, from a donor lens, the way to make this interesting is to talk about what are the immediate, and by immediate, I mean, what are the things that can be achieved within the next 6 months, the things that can be achieved within the next 12 months, knowing the fact that this is a very complex problem and requires a lot of policy level thinking as well in terms of social protection. I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thanks, Amit. Thanks. On the point that you made of, I mean, how do you look at an intervention for people that potentially, I mean, that don't exist in the entire frame of how you look at workforce? Gitanjali, would love for you to share your thoughts on accessing this potential workforce should they, when they want to access these opportunities. What has worked in your experience, Gitanjali? Because we always have middlemen mediating, and you could have Swanidhi loans, you could have various different government schemes, and you could have models that then establish connects between industry and government as well. But it's going to come down to the first mile of accessing these women. So what in your mind has worked there? You're on mute.
I think the presence, whosoever is present there continuously for years, whosoever is visible there continuously for years, they can be the implementing partner, because they can implement things and people will trust them. Because government also have a lot of schemes, like you rightly mentioned, but they're not there on the field. They will send some people who will then implement it, and those people have no knowledge about that field. And as a result of which, those women will rarely accept you if you're going with the police officials. Then they might talk to you, they might have a circle with you, they might give you some answers, but those will be on a very superficial level. So I just feel that the implementing part has to be very, very strong. And here I also want to make a point, what Amit shared, that from a donor's point of view, but this is my personal, I would say, I have a problem with this thing, because every time we cannot come from one single way, which is that how a donor will look into it. We have to find donors who understands that this is not like any other work in which they are investing. And this is not just that they're investing money, they're investing themselves totally into such a topic. So we really need to find out donors also who are ready to look from the ground to above. कि okay, I'm not here for 2-year commitment. मुझे 2 साल में फर्क नहीं दिखना है कि 100 औरतें बाहर निकल गई हैं and I've got my annual report made that 100 women are out. But I'm here for like at least 8 to 10 years का difference, जहाँ पे I started with one woman, I started building my little relationship with her, and now after 7 to 8 years, she's out independent, doing her work, taking care of her children in her own way, and she doesn't need us. I think that's success. And we really need to find out. I mean, I would say reject donors if they're not agreed to really be sensitive towards such an issue. We don't need such donors. पैसा मतलब मेरा पर्सपेक्टिव ये है कि हम अगर पैसा किसी से मांग रहे हैं तो वी आर नॉट आस्किंग मनी फॉर आवरसेल्व्स, वी आर आस्किंग मनी फॉर अ कॉज। तो हमें सेटिस्फैक्शन मिल रहा है काम कर कर, डोनर को सेटिस्फैक्शन मिल रहा है, ओ मेरे पैसे से ये काम हुआ। सो ईगो तो दोनों की बूस्ट हो रही है। So why are we boosting one's ego more? That's just my perspective.
No, I don't think that was the idea of the question either. So I'm just going to flip that and actually go over to Lakshmi on the last question that hopefully I'm allowed to ask before I turn it over. Is how do we frame the narrative, Lakshmi? I mean, it has been heartening to see funders across the board coming in to look at investment theories that stand for mid to long term change, but at some level, it depends also on how do we frame the narrative and bring in this ecosystem. So would love to understand, Lakshmi, your thoughts on this.
Great. And Gitanjali, thank you for sharing your thoughts, because I definitely resonate with pretty much every statement that she made, and of course with Amit's. But it is difficult, right? I mean, it's not an easy narrative. There are no easy wins here. This is a very complex problem. It's not going to get resolved. I don't think there are easy wins. There will be short-term, mid-term wins that one has to go for, because I guess you also have to keep everyone motivated. You need the small wins. But I think we need to look for the right set of donors, right? To talk about, it could be in CSR, it could be foundations, HNIs, but you need to find patient capital. You need to look for the right capital, patient, willing to experiment, because as Gitanjali said when she was making her opening remarks, you can't take this, say, okay, it works in every community. So you're going to have to experiment. You're going to have to be very agile. You will work with very different kind of organizations here, I assume. You will work with implementation organizations. You also work with, you partner with bringing in organizations who are able to bring in innovations, who are able to talk to the donors, who are able to raise the money. So I think you need a collective, right? You need a group of people. In that group of people, you need the funders who are flexible, who say, okay, this is working, but so long as they trust you, that you have the interest of the community at heart. So I think you need to demonstrate that. You need to bring together a strong group of people who have credibility on different aspects, right? Be it skilling, be it in community work, all of that. Demonstrate the credibility, put it up front that this is, we're going to learn along the way. There's no point in soft stepping around that, and then make that narrative. Be very transparent, and that is going to take time. This is going to involve us iterating on even our pilot. Even a pilot would be a phase which is probably stretching for 3 to 5 years. You never know, right? But pilot with the ambition to scale is what I would say. I don't know if that answers your question, Aarti. There is no clear narrative, but I do think this is the way to bring funders on board. And possibly you look for one anchor funder, right? Yes. Convince one and the others are likely to follow.
Yes, and those are the kind of wins one's hoping for. So 4 key points that I'm taking from the really rich discussion that we've had, and so many diverse environments and perspectives that have been brought in from the panel members today. Let's see how, there could be sources of funding, government schemes that have potential. How do we bring them to the right target segments? How do we visualize the workforce first? Because they're very invisible today, right from simple things like Aadhaar cards to then their access to various different other services and support elements. 3 is how do we implement with trusted partners that have been working within the communities for years, given that's going to be mid to long term. How do we look at redefining success metrics and building the narrative to the ecosystem in different ways? And for this, as Lakshmi said, we need a collective approach where diverse funders can come in, potentially in different areas as well. But it's important to build a narrative towards the long term while looking at some of the quick wins, like Amit mentioned. With that, would love to pass over the mic to Alisha to take it forward. Thank you so much, panelists. Been a really rich discussion in the last 40 minutes.
Thank you so much, Aarti. I think it definitely was a very, very engaging session. I believe we've had a lot of questions. So if your questions have not been answered, but you've typed them in the chat box, we will get back to you. Or I've also left an email address that you can use to email us your questions. And with this, we come to the end of our event today. But before we close, I would like to invite Ms. Chitra Iyer, who's the founder at Space to Grow, to share closing remarks and state the next steps with the audience. Chitra is an award-winning social entrepreneur with 17 years of experience in the fields of education, child protection, livelihoods, and skill development, and has worked across geographies and ecosystems encompassing Indian and international agencies, corporate CSR organizations, and various central and state government agencies. Over to you, Chitra.
Thank you so much, Alicia. I think on behalf of WeEducate, Space to Grow, and Satwa, I would really like to thank each one of you for joining us today. This was a really thought-provoking session with very clear calls to action that can be worked on further. I would like to especially thank the keynote speakers and the insightful presentation that we had on the debt trap and the need assessment. I can't be more grateful to our esteemed panelists who have facilitated such a lively discussion, and many of the philanthropies, CSOs, and skill development partners, and others who have joined us. I'm sure that many of their insights will enable us to plan the way forward. And thanks also to such a wonderful audience who are key experts in their own field and have taken out this time. Some of these key things that I would want to underscore briefly are the debt trap presented by Professor Beulah and the need assessment that Nishkash presented very clearly shows the complexity of this problem that we have at our hand. But like Nagma very clearly said, we are looking and we have the sex workers as key stakeholders and not really beneficiaries of this program. Very importantly, we need heterogeneous solutions and the possibility to access this through the curricula of different languages, digital medium, and Mr. Manisha's open discussion on how we could partner with NSDC has been extremely, enlightening. I wouldn't, it wouldn't be any different. And I think, Gitanjali, thank you for pointing out that, the investors who we engage with have to become just partners and not just mere funders. And Lakshmi, the thought on solutions coming from the community, that's exactly what we aspire for. One of the key things that Amit mentioned, and this is what we've been thinking through the journey of actually coming to this roundtable, has been that these vulnerable women have been invisible and they've been hidden in plain sight. And the whole idea is, how do we really collaborate to make this happen? And Mr. Partha, thanks for pointing out this is like a huge task at hand to really address a extremely complex problem, but thanks for telling us that it's not impossible. So we at WeEducate, and along with our partnership with Satwa, really want to focus on how to really collaborate and make this happen. So as our next step, we announced the launch of setting up of a coalition of experts from philanthropy, skill development sector, and CSOs, academicians, and of course the government body. The idea would be to engage on a constant basis and create and propose innovative solutions and implement effective pilots and constantly scope out for opportunities to scale with the government. We can truly accelerate the impact that we really aspire for. So please reach out to us. Feel free to write to us at projectpunk@gmail.com to be a part of this initiative and make a difference. Thanks a lot once again. Take care and see you soon. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us today.